Kalen Truce had learned a lot about interstellar diplomacy in his career, but absolutely nothing had prepared him for the way the Xelari delegation reacted to his cat. The moment the feline entered the room, stalking in with her tail held high, and her yellow eyes locked on the tallest alien in the group, the entire Xelari contingent recoiled. One of them, Ambassador Korth, let out a sharp, trilling yelp and dove behind a low table, knocking over a tray of nutrient spheres. The others followed, pressing against the far wall of the conference chamber with their limbs tucked defensively against their torsos. Kalen, dressed in the standard diplomatic corps navy blue uniform, blinked and looked down at the source of the chaos. "Really?" he muttered, bending down to scoop up the small, black-furred cat. "This is Juniper. She's not dangerous." Ambassador Korth peered over the edge of the table, his eyes wide and glowing faintly lavender. "You brought a K-Rathex hunter into a formal negotiation chamber?" Kalen raised an eyebrow. "A what?" "That creature," Korth hissed, pointing a trembling digit at Juniper, who had now tucked herself comfortably into Kalen's arm. "It is a K-Rathex, a predator from Death Wind sector. We lost an entire mining outpost to those things. Their stealth, their claws, their uncanny ability to stalk prey silently for days. You tamed one?" Kalen tightened his grip on Juniper just slightly as she began to purr. "Tamed? No, she's my pet." The room went completely silent. Korth slowly raised himself to his full height, his gill-like neck folds pulsing. He turned to one of his aides. "Begin evacuation protocols. We are in the presence of a class, a terrestrial apex." "Stop, just stop," Kalen set Juniper on the table, where she immediately began grooming herself. "She's not an interstellar predator. She's a house cat, a domestic species. She eats kibble. She naps 18 hours a day." "That is clearly part of its hunting strategy," Korth said, his voice now low and suspicious. "Feign vulnerability, lull prey into a false sense of security, then strike." "She's 12 years old and has arthritis," Kalen said, dragging a hand down his face. The Xelari were not convinced. Negotiations were suspended for the day, and Kalen spent the next 3 hours explaining in excruciating detail the domestication of Felis catus, complete with images, historical records, and a video montage of cats falling off furniture. It didn't help. The next morning, Kalen was summoned to the orbital headquarters of the Intergalactic Council's Earth Relations Division. The imposing circular structure hung above the Earth like a steel halo, and Kalen was escorted through twisting corridors until he arrived at a chamber filled with representatives from 12 different species. Most of them looked uncomfortable. A few looked terrified. Ambassador Xelari, who resembled a walking jellyfish in a tailored robe, floated forward. "We have reviewed the footage. This creature Juniper has been identified by no fewer than 4 species as highly dangerous. Your presence here has caused significant diplomatic strain. She's a cat." Kalen insisted again, perhaps louder than he should have. "She's my pet. She sleeps on my couch and throws up hairballs. You do realize," a reptilian ambassador named Vess hissed, "that on my world such a creature would be considered a precision biological weapon." "And yet," Kalen replied, "on Earth she's a common household animal. Kids have these. Elderly women have dozens. You can buy them for 20 credits at a shelter." There was a long pause. Then Xelari asked, "Why?" Kalen hesitated. He could have gone into the history again. "The mutual benefit of pest control and companionship. The evolution of human-animal bonding." He could have quoted studies on oxytocin and endorphins. Instead, he said, "Because we like them." This, apparently, was a concept entirely foreign to the room. Later that week, Kalen was reassigned to the Xelari homeworld to smooth things over. Juniper, of course, stayed behind on Earth by order of the Council, and after what he suspected was a heavily edited security report titled "The Predatory Menace of Earth's Miniature Death Mammals." He arrived on the Xelari capital, Falun, during the wet season. The air was humid, thick with spores, and the skies rumbled constantly with distant storms. The Xelari architecture was all angles and verticality, with buildings that resembled blades standing upright. Kalen was given a modest suite carved into the side of a cliff, with a view that would have been breathtaking if he weren't already worried about falling to his death. He spent the first week attending formal dinners, reciting cultural apologies, and watching as every single Xelari avoided his gaze whenever the subject of Juniper came up. On the 8th day, Ambassador Korth invited him to observe a military training exercise. Kalen agreed, mostly because he needed to distract them from whatever cat-related theories were still circulating. The exercise took place in an artificial canyon filled with drones mimicking various threats. Korth led the tour, explaining the strategy, until a siren wailed and a malfunction caused 3 drones to misfire, crashing into the observation platform. Kalen was thrown back hard against a railing. Something cracked in his side and he gasped, struggling to breathe. Pain bloomed through his ribs and he collapsed to his knees. Several Xelari guards rushed in, weapons drawn, but the drones had already self-neutralized. Korth knelt beside him. "You are injured." "I noticed," Kalen groaned. A field medic scanned him and frowned. "Fracture in the 8th rib. Potential minor internal bleeding. He requires transport." The trip to the med center was a blur. Kalen faded in and out of consciousness, the pain making it hard to focus. When he came to, he was lying in a chamber of soft blue light with some kind of local anesthetic coursing through his system. Korth stood nearby, arms folded. "You should not have been exposed to that level of risk," the ambassador said. "Wasn't exactly on the brochure," Kalen muttered. He grimaced, shifting slightly. "How long till I can move?" 2 weeks of bed rest minimum, followed by monitored activity. "Your species is fragile." "Yeah, no argument there." Korth watched him for a moment, then asked, "This Juniper, if she had been present on that platform, I'd have been too busy keeping her from jumping off the edge to get hurt myself," Kalen said. "She's fearless and reckless." "Yet you still keep her." "I love her." Korth tilted his head. "Despite the danger she may pose," Kalen squinted at him. "Are we still talking about the cat?" The ambassador didn't answer. The recovery was slow. Kalen stayed in the med chamber for 4 days, then was moved to his suite with a strict regimen of rest, pain management, and 0 diplomatic activity. He followed it exactly, mostly because he didn't have the strength to argue. By the 2nd week, he could walk across the room without help, though it still hurt to breathe too deeply. That's when a package arrived from Earth. Inside was a small device, a holo-projector with a message from an old friend at the diplomatic corps. He tapped the activation panel. Juniper appeared in shimmering light, chasing a red dot across the floor. Then she stopped, looked directly into the camera, and meowed once before curling up and going to sleep. Kalen watched the loop play 3 times before he realized Korth had entered the room. "You miss her," the ambassador said quietly. "Yeah," Korth nodded once, then stepped forward. "We would like to study this creature more, not for containment, for understanding." Kalen leaned back in his chair. "You want to meet her," Korth hesitated, "under controlled conditions." "Yes." Kalen considered it. "Then you'll have to meet her on Earth." Korth's eyes flickered. "We will prepare." A soft chime echoed through the guest wing at Falloon's diplomatic enclave as Kalen opened his eyes to the dim indigo glow of the alien sunrise. The pain in his ribs had dulled into a manageable throb, but the stiffness in his spine reminded him that sleeping on a Xelari therapeutic slab was about as restful as curling up on a pile of bricks. According to the Enclave's medical AI, the slab promoted optimal spinal tension and circulatory resistance. According to Kalen, it promoted grumpiness. He pushed himself upright, hissing involuntarily as his side protested, then reached for the folded tunic draped over the back of a hovering chair. The air smelled faintly of minerals and ozone, and a low rumble from the city's vertical transit columns vibrated through the windows. A knock, not a sound, but a pulse in the floor signaled a visitor. He shuffled to the entry panel, tapped it, and the wall slid aside with a hiss. Ambassador Korth stood there, wearing what Kalen could only describe as ceremonial armor, though it resembled a translucent carapace more than anything protective. Behind him stood a younger Xelari with a cluster of scanning instruments strapped to his upper limbs. "You're early," Kalen said. "We calculated that your species performs best 2 hours after waking," Korth replied. "We allowed for 1.5, Kalen blinked. "That math doesn't help me. Your recovery appears to be proceeding at 94% efficiency. Acceptable." "Glad to be acceptable." He stepped back. "Come in. Just don't touch the slab. It's got a mean sense of humor." Korth entered, glancing around with the wary posture of someone entering a low-gravity weapons bay. The younger Xelari followed, eyes darting to every surface. "This is Othel," Korth said. "He will monitor you during our visit to Earth." Kalen paused mid-stretch. "Hang on, visit? You invited us, we have prepared." "I said you'd have to meet Juniper on Earth." "I didn't expect you to show up 3 days later." "We interpreted your statement as a formal diplomatic proposal." Kalen rubbed his temples. "Of course you did." Korth stepped closer. "We have procured a containment module, 4 behavioral specialists, and a xenozoological hazard team." "We are ready. She's a cat, not a bomb. Your pet has a documented history of inducing panic in trained diplomats. We will be cautious." "Fine," Kalen said, exhaling slowly. "But no hazard suits. She'll crawl into one and get stuck. It'll be a whole thing." Othel let out a chime that Kalen guessed was dismay. By the time the transport docked with the orbital ring, Kalen's rib ached from turbulence and from arguing mostly the latter. The shuttle to Earth was sleek, silent, and far over-engineered. Kalen sat near the front, nursing a lukewarm nutrient pouch and watching as Korth and Othel debated whether Earth's atmospheric composition could alter Xelari neural chemistry. "It's a little humid in Georgia," Kalen said around a sip, "but I doubt it'll make you hallucinate." "We are not concerned with hallucination. Our fear receptors respond differently to mammalian pheromones." "Then stay upwind of the cat," Kalen muttered. As the shuttle broke into Earth's upper atmosphere, clouds peeled away like whipped cream, revealing a sprawl of pines and low houses. The landing pad, built into the side of a wooded animal sanctuary, shimmered with heat. Kalen stepped out first, limping slightly. The air hit him like a warm blanket soaked in sap and wildflowers. He breathed deeply, then turned toward the squat building at the edge of the trees. Inside, a woman in a green jumpsuit waited beside a carrier. Juniper sat within, eyes narrowed, tail twitching. "She's been fed," the woman said. "And she climbed onto the roof last night, so she's feeling bold. Good luck." Kalen crouched beside the carrier. "Hey, monster." Juniper blinked slowly. Korth approached with visible reluctance. Othel held a scanner between them, analyzing something Kalen couldn't see. Juniper locked onto Korth immediately. "She is assessing me," Korth said. "She's bored," Kalen replied. "You're just tall and shiny." Juniper stood, turned in a circle, and rammed her head against the side of the carrier. "What does that mean?" Othel asked. "She wants out." "We are not ready." Kalen popped the latch. Juniper slinked out like a liquid shadow, stretched and flopped onto her side in a sunbeam. Korth jerked back 1/2 meter. Othel's scanner beeped rapidly. "She has exposed her core," Korth said. "She's sunbathing. It is a dominance display. She's asleep." Juniper yawned, then began licking her paw. Othel turned off his scanner, muttered something that sounded like a prayer, and backed toward the wall. Later, beneath the porch's overhang, Kalen poured a bowl of water while Juniper stalked squirrels in the underbrush. Korth sat on a bench made from salvaged wood, arms folded. "You said your people keep these freely in their homes," he said. "Millions do. And you are not afraid." "She's a cat. She has no loyalty. She ignores commands. She has claws and fangs. She also purrs when she's happy, rubs against my leg when I'm sad, and once jumped into a shower just to be near me." Korth was quiet for a moment. "That is highly inefficient behavior. It's not about efficiency. Kalen watched Juniper leap onto the railing, tail flicking. It's about connection. Korth tilted his head. Explain. She doesn't need to obey, she chooses to stay. That choice means more than any obligation. Othil emerged from the house, clutching a tablet. The creature has accessed the upper ventilation shaft. Kalen stood. She's in the crawl space? Yes. That means she's under the attic. Othil nodded. That means, Kalen added, she's probably headed for the insulation. Korth raised both arms. What is insulation? Something she likes to shred. 2 hours later, Kalen stood in the attic with a flashlight, covered in dust, coaxing Juniper out from a pile of fiberglass batting. Korth and Othil waited below, visibly agitated. She does not respond to authority, Korth said. She barely responds to gravity. She is a paradox. Kalen tucked Juniper under one arm and descended the ladder. She is chaos, Othil added. She is family, Kalen said. That evening, after the sun dipped low and the trees vibrated with the songs of unseen insects, the three of them sat on the porch while Juniper napped in Kalen's lap. Korth stared into the gathering dark. I do not understand your species. You don't have to, Kalen said. Understanding isn't required for respect. Othil glanced over. Do you believe she respects you? Kalen looked down at the cat, who flicked her tail once and pressed her head against his hand. Yeah, he said. I do. Korth stood slowly. We will return to Falun tomorrow. There is much to report, Kalen nodded. Just don't call her a weapon. I will call her what she is, Korth said, a creature whose unpredictability defies classification. And perhaps a symbol. Of what? Of your kind's terrifying comfort with the unknown. The Xelari delegation stood motionless in the customs screening chamber, surrounded by sterile white walls and a faint hum of atmospheric filtration. They were dressed in travel armor, a flexible weave of silver and violet that shimmered with every movement, though none of them moved much. Korth had his arms folded in a way that suggested he'd rather be anywhere else. Othil stared at the ceiling with the deep, solemn patience of someone who had accepted a terrible fate. The others simply avoided making eye contact with the carrier in Kalen's right hand. Juniper, nestled inside, was asleep. Kalen set the carrier gently on the low bench near the exit. She's not going to explode, you know. She has already infiltrated a ceiling, Othil said. That was fiberglass and curiosity. You try living in a box for 2 weeks and see how long you wait before exploring the vents. A customs officer, human, approached with a portable scanner. He nodded to the Xelari and then turned to Kalen. You're cleared for departure. Cabin's prepped. Just make sure the containment harness is engaged during takeoff. She's not a plasma core, Kalen muttered. She's listed as a Class 5 biological anomaly. She's a cat. The officer glanced through the carrier's transparent panel. Juniper yawned. Right, the officer said, and left. They boarded the diplomatic transport without incident. It was a mid-range cruiser, outfitted for interspecies negotiation, which meant every surface was either adjustable or neutral. No colors brighter than sand, no textures more stimulating than soft foam, and absolutely no sharp angles. The seating cabin reconfigured as they entered, aligning itself into a semicircle with a central table. Kalen took the far seat and opened the carrier door. Juniper stepped out, blinked at the ship's lighting, and immediately climbed into Kalen's lap. You are allowing her unrestricted movement, Korth said. She's more predictable this way. She is on a diplomatic vessel. She's also tired. She gets anxious in enclosed spaces. Let her settle. Othil activated a scanner, then turned it off again after a single beep. He looked at Korth. Her stress levels are elevated. She's a cat on a spaceship, Kalen said. What did you expect? Purring through launch, the ship disengaged from the docking ring without ceremony. Earth receded in the viewport, blue and bright. Juniper watched it, ears twitching, then curled tighter in Kalen's lap and began to nap. 2 days into the journey to Falun, Juniper went missing. Kalen had been sleeping, curled under a thermal blanket in the crew quarters, when the ship's environmental AI gently nudged him awake with a soft tone and the words, "Unauthorized movement detected in Deck 3 hydroponics." He sat up at once. "Is she in the lettuce again?" The AI didn't answer because it wasn't programmed for sarcasm. Kalen pulled on his boots and headed for the lift, rubbing his face as he walked. The corridor lights adjusted to his movement, dimming behind him and brightening ahead. Deck 3 was quiet, too quiet. Hydroponics smelled like damp soil and faint citrus, a sign the lemon vines were in pollination bloom. He stepped inside and saw her instantly. Juniper was perched on the narrow rim of a planter basin, tail swishing over the control panel for the nutrient mist. Below her, a Xelari technician stood frozen, both upper limbs raised in a gesture that Kalen guessed meant surrender. "She was watching me," the technician said. "For 40 minutes. She likes movement," Kalen said, crouching. "You're twitchy." She mimicked my hand gestures. "She probably thought you were playing." "I was calibrating oxygen injection ratios." "Same thing to her." Kalen extended a hand. Juniper jumped down, landed softly, and rubbed against his leg. The technician retreated without a word. Back in the cabin, Korth waited. "She accessed restricted infrastructure," he said. "She likes plants." "She locked a technician out of his own control panel." "She does that with my tablet too." "This is not reassuring." Kalen rolled his shoulder. "You said you wanted to understand her." "This is what she does. She's curious, independent, and completely uninterested in your rules." Korth didn't respond. He was watching Juniper, who had now taken to weaving between the legs of the central table. "She chooses her own path," he said quietly. "Exactly. She is unlike anything we have cataloged. She's a cat." The ship arrived in Falloon's orbit 4 days later. Kalen hadn't slept much. Juniper had discovered the ventilation ducts again, and while she hadn't gotten stuck, her midnight exploration had triggered no fewer than 6 security alerts. They docked at the same cliffside enclave Kalen had recovered in weeks earlier. The air was heavier now, thicker with pollen from the spire flowers blooming along the ridgelines. A transport platform descended to meet them. Korth stepped off first, followed by Othel and the rest of the delegation. Kalen came last, carrier in hand. They were met by a trio of Xelari biologists, each flanked by a pair of armored guards. None of them made any move to approach. "We have prepared an observation habitat," one of the biologists said. "Neutral environment, non-stimulating surfaces." "Monitored airflow, she'll hate it," Kalen replied. "It is constructed according to interspecies containment guidelines. She's not a pathogen. She is unpredictable." Kalen opened the carrier. Juniper stepped out, looked around at the alien terrain, then sneezed once and sat down. "She seems unimpressed," Othel said. "She's not a fan of protocol." The biologists began scanning her from a distance. Juniper ignored them, more interested in a swaying piece of vine that had wrapped itself around a railing. When one of the guards shifted slightly, she bounded up the support beam and onto the observation dome's outer shell. Kalen sighed. "That's not a dominance display, by the way, that's just climbing." "She is ascending our facility," one of the guards said. "She's a climber. She is defying containment. She's a cat," Korth turned to him. "You once said she represents your people's comfort with the unknown." "I remember." "I believe I understand now." Kalen raised an eyebrow. "She is not tamed. She is tolerated. She is not obedient. She is accepted." Kalen nodded. "Exactly." Korth watched as Juniper leapt down again, landing lightly beside a stunned technician. "We have spent generations attempting to categorize and control every anomaly," Korth said. "And yet this creature, this feline, operates entirely outside expected parameters. She's not here to be expected. She's just here." Korth took a breath, his gill folds dilating. "We will not attempt to contain her further." Kalen raised both brows. "That's a big shift. We cannot understand what refuses to be boxed. We can only observe and perhaps adapt." Later that evening, Kalen sat on the edge of his suite's terrace, Juniper sprawled beside him. The stars above Falun were sharp and brilliant, the sky thinner here than on Earth. The city lights below shimmered like veins of gold in the cliff face. Korth arrived without ceremony. She has chosen your lap again. She likes sleeping on warm things. You are not concerned about her presence in a foreign biosphere. She's not invasive. She's lazy. Korth sat beside him. We will not classify her further, he said. She is not a predator. Not a hazard, she is an exception. Kalen looked down at the sleeping cat. She always was. Juniper twitched once in her sleep, then curled tighter. The stars wheeled overhead, silent and uncaring. Korth inclined his head slightly. We have chosen to revise our diplomatic species assessment of Earth. Kalen raised an eyebrow. You are no longer marked as resilient mammalian generalists. What are we now? Korth's eyes glowed faintly in the dark. Companions of chaos. Kalen chuckled. Sounds about right. And Juniper purred.